Welcome back to another episode of the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, I invite Frank Velasquez on the show. He is a fellow Perform Better presenter, and he's with the Allegheny Health Network in Pennsylvania. And we're going to talk about all things related to posture, realigning the body, and utilizing strength training to achieve that goal. Remember, subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. And just click that subscribe button when you get a chance. Hope you enjoy. Well, Frank, I really appreciate you taking your time out. You know, I was looking through the Perform Better events, and I was looking through Chicago, which is coming up in July, and I see your name next to the topic you're speaking of, and it just so resonated with me. I gotta say, it's one of the few times where I've seen somebody talking about posture and program design when it comes to strength conditioning. So I had to reach out to you, and I like talking obviously to other Perform Better presenters because the knowledge level is just amazing. So I can't wait to dive into this. First of all, you know, you've got your background with Pittsburgh Pirates, and you were with the Texas Rangers organization, athletic training, strength conditioning. You know, you can go to your website, obviously, or even your LinkedIn page and get the bio, but what inspired that? Like, what triggered your break away from a conventional strength conditioning routine to something that began focusing on posture?
You know, that's a good question, Rocky. I don't know if I guess traditional strength conditioning routine or strength training routine is pushing and pulling iron, you know, and when I got into baseball, strength training was starting to become more popular. You know, I got in on the medical side. I was an athletic trainer, learned a ton about shoulder care and external rotation and internal rotation. When I got in, a lot was focused on the rotator cuff. As we started to evolve as an industry, I'm talking about the mid 90s in arm care, we kind of got away from the rotator cuff and started going more proximal to the body. And we got into the scapula and the position of the scapula and its role in taking care of the rotator cuff. So we kind of, as on the medical and the strength side, you know, we left all the Codman's exercises and manuals and rotator cuffs and tubing and dumbbell work for that little 4 set of muscles for the rotator cuff that centralizes the humeral head and the shoulder, and focused on posture and mid and lower traps, rhomboids. In a ball player, here are your two scapula. Here's, it looks like left, but it's the right. I guess let me go this way. You know, can you see?
I'm good.
On a right-handed thrower, we see a lot of scapulas that are floated out here. Okay. So our goal is to get it back into a better position to secure the humerus, create more space between the humeral head and acromion where the rotator cuff sits, and it allows the cuff to work better. Okay, less friction, less inflammation, recover faster. And the rotator cuff is part of what generates velocity and throwing, but it's not everything. But in regards to recovery, and there's small muscles. So that's what started me down this road. And then as strength training became more popular in baseball, especially at the professional levels, I like to lift weights, and I always worked hard as a student athlete growing up. I went on and got my CSCS, and I had the ATC to back it up. And I had an opportunity I was in the same level for 3 years as a minor league athletic trainer. There was just no movement with the Rangers. Everyone stayed in place. But the strength side, the major league strength coach resigned. The coordinator bumped up, and they asked me if I wanted to take the coordinator's job. I'm like, no brainer. Yeah, man, let's roll. That took me from a minor league strength coach to a coordinator position, like a supervisory position, where instead of being with A ball all the time, I saw the rookie ball, low A, high A, double A, triple A, big leagues. I would rove. It was called a roving position. I would rove to all the levels and make sure they were following the programs. And I did that for 3 years with the Rangers until I got the job with the Pirates as a major league strength coach. But a long answer to your question, that's what got me started on the whole skeletal alignment is, okay, if the shoulder care goes back to scapular positioning, then what are we doing with the low backs, hips, and knees? You know, and for for me, what I've learned is pelvic positioning. I mean, just about every athlete on the planet or person has some level of anterior pelvic tilt. Now, if it's enough, if it's excessive, then sometimes there's symptoms with that: low back, medial knee, anterior hip pain. And I think as a society, I know as a society, we're front-sided animals. We are front-sided animals. 99% of what we do throughout the day is in front of our body. Women, put their bras on, and us men, we put our belts on, and we don't do much back there. So all day long, we're getting this front side work in, low level intensity, of course. I'm talking driving, drinking your coffee, reaching for things. But then we go to the weight room, and people want to continue to work this front side because they can see it. Pecs, biceps, abs, quads, they can see it, and it's motivating. And it just creates a bigger imbalance.
So that's interesting because, you were still like, not to dig into, but just pause there. You went from the conventional rotator cuff protocols and understanding of the four muscles, infra, supraspinatus, teres minor, subscapularis, that keep the girdle in check. But then you just went out to the scap, but still maintaining a kind of an isolated viewpoint. But somewhere along the way, you broke away. That's kind of my question. It's like, okay, well, if I'm looking at the rotator cuff, I need to be concerned with the scapula. Now, if I'm concerned with the scapula, what affects the scapula? Well, the spine. Okay, and follow the spine down, then the pelvis. And eventually you get down all the way to the end of the body,
Right.
or
Right.
you go up and you go out the head or something. So
Right.
I guess I'm wondering, did this just slowly kind of melt like a volcanic lava oozing down the shield for you? Like you're like, oh, I just got to start exploring all the chain. Or did you just go after the scap, boom, it's all whole body integrative motion. I'm going to try and figure out what's going on.
Well, that's another great point, because I skipped a part here. And while I was still in baseball, okay, when we saw issues with the elbow, okay, and we would treat the elbow, and it'd get better, and then they'd get to throwing again, and the problem would come back.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, we got to go up the chain. So that elbow problem was because of a lack of internal rotation in the shoulder, maybe. Okay. So we're connected there. So we would have the same thing with the shoulder. Kid would come in, posterior shoulder, anterior shoulder pain, whatever, and we would treat the shoulder, and it would go away, and the guy would start throwing again, and stuff would come back, the inflammation. So then it's okay, well, we went down the chain and we got into the core and the landing side internal rotation. Like, this guy has shoulder pain because he has lacking internal rotation on his left hip as a right-handed thrower. So that's when really it all started to make sense to me. Like, man, it's skeletal alignment. And I heard, I want to say it was either Vern Gambetta or Gray Cook. I think it was Gray that said, we are, as practitioners, as therapists, strength coaches, athletic trainers, personal trainers, what have you, we are all guilty at one point or another for building lean mass on dysfunctional bodies. So that reverts back to let's improve the skeletal alignment before I start building mass on this body. Otherwise, I'm just setting them up for a bigger bang somewhere down the road.
Yes. Okay. Then this leads into a lot of athletes' concerns that, okay, if that's my priority, getting alignment, does that mean I'm not going to lift?
No, not at all. We train all the time. We train with intensity, but a lot of our focus is on the posterior chain. With all that anterior activity we get. Now, we squat and we lunge, but we do a lot of posterior chain, RDLs, one-legged RDLs, glute ham raises, and then all the uniped exercises under the sun: sled pushes, Bulgarian split squats, box step ups, reverse lunges, forward lunges. We're very big uniped trained. But so, yeah, we train with intensity and we periodize our programs. But for every push, we do 2 pulls. So, my ball players, we don't do barbell bench press just because of the fixation of the hands on the barbell. Where dumbbells, I have some freedom and I can put that shoulder in a safe position, whether I'm doing neutral or I'm just have the ability to quarter rotate the arms as they go up, where I can't do that on the barbell. But for every push, We do 2 pulls with all of our athletes.
So that's dealing with anterior posterior chain. But what about unilateral asymmetries? What if you've got the dominant arm versus the one that's just not quite as well? I don't want to even say strong, but the pathways are not the same, the recruitment
Mhm.
pattern, the force production. How do you address these asymmetries?
Unilateral work, but we train everybody for symmetry. Now everybody has a dominant side. They'll never be here, but I
No,
don't want them here. You know,
further
I don't.
away. Yeah.
So I want to try to get it closer. This non-dominant side stronger, and if I can do that, that helps with the symmetry of the skeleton, and it increases range of motion. You
Do
know, if
you
I can.
still do you deal with the biasness, just like you were saying, for every press, for every one press, I'll do 2 pulls. So for every one set of on the dominant side, I'm going to do 2 sets on the one that's
No,
not.
no, no, no. It's even, because most people don't work on the non-dominant side. So whatever I can do there, it's going to bridge the gap. Unless if we have a rehabilitation case, then we will do sets just on that unilateral side. But as a healthy athlete, I keep it the same. I keep it the same volume and intensity, but it's gonna help bridge the gap just based on that alone. And we are working both ways, not just one way.
All right, so you're slipping it in without really telling them. That's kind of
Right.
sneaky. I like that. But what about when you have somebody that say, let's just say they're doing some type of unilateral overhead press and they can handle 50 pounds on one side, but
Mhm.
only 30 on the other? Are we going to stay 30-30 on each side and let that weaker side develop equally? Or are you going to stay 50 on the dominant side, 30 on the side, and just let them get stronger at whatever rate they will?
I've never had that issue. I've never had somebody that has had that much asymmetry. Number one, if you're talking that particular exercise, we keep it medium to low intensity, anything overhead, unless we're push pressing, and that's when we're with the barbell. Okay. But dumbbell or kettlebell work, it is it's medium to lower intensity just because we're very vulnerable in this position,
Yeah.
unilateral. So I've never found that a kid could do 20K and 14K on the opposite side. I just haven't had that. But I would take that exercise out until I coach that non-dominant side up where we could do that weight, both sides.
Cool. Okay. And then I love geeking out with you here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
about, there's a one leg that likes to be forward more often than the opposite. We
Yep.
are in a dominant fashion there, patterns emerge and so on. Do you like to disrupt that pattern and put the dominant leg back behind them rather than forward?
Nope. The body's, to me, it's like an X. Dominant, dominant. Non-dominant, non-dominant. I keep it like that as much as I can. Now, some of my coaches will like to disrupt that, and they'll do same side, same arm, one-legged RDLs,
Yeah.
things like that, just because it's a little different variety. But the body works like that for a reason. It's contralateral, so I train contralateral. That's me personally. That's our methodology. But I will have some coaches, and I'll ask him. I was like, "Do we want him doing that?" Or he goes, "No, no, no. I need to fix. They have that weight in the wrong hand." But
Gotcha.
no one's ever thrown a punch worth anything with right arm and right leg going forward. It's that left leg forward. We cock it back, and delivering the power through the core, that rotational power, that X, the Serapi effect.
Yeah,
That's how
that
we train.
Mexican shawl, exactly. So
Yes.
when you started to explore posture, what were the
Mhm.
things that started to really become apparent to you? Like you couldn't help but see them.
Scapular winging.
Mhm.
When you see the scaps and boom, it's popped up and like the shark fin. That's
Yep.
part of our evaluation is, I'll check abduction, I'll clear flexion, um, internal, external rotation of the shoulder. I compare them bilateral. We see a lot of GERD, glenohumeral and tonal rotation deficit on that throwing side. But then I get to the side of them, and if I can grab underneath that scap, and just about everybody I know is really overcompensating with their upper traps. It's where we carry stress. Most people have a forward head posture, they're rounded shoulder. Like, again, we're very front-sided animals. These things don't help. you know,
Yeah, the phones, no.
these phones. So we'll do some work on a kid, whether it be in the therapy side or the strength side. And then I see them out in the lobby, you know, they're like this on their phones, head down, forward shove. I'm like, listen, we just got done doing all this with you. At least hold your phone up here, you know, look where your head is. I want your body to support your head and not these upper traps and sternal muscles in your neck. You know, they're not that big. Your head's about 6 pounds, 7 pounds. So what was your question?
What were the things that really popped out
Oh
aside
yeah,
from
yeah.
scapular winging? Were there some other things? Head protrusion or projection forward? Yeah.
Yeah, the scap winging, that's about every kid we see, just about every person. They're so dominant on the upper trap. Their mid and lower traps just aren't strong enough. So we start with simple, you know, simple retractions. Retract. When you retract, I don't want to see this. Your shoulders should actually get further from your ears when you retract. So with every pull that we do in the weight room, Rock, we retract. Set your scaps or pinch your scaps or retract your scaps.
Yeah.
Lat pull downs, retract, pull. Because I can do the exercises till the cows come home, but unless I'm retracting, I'm missing all those mid and lower traps.
Yeah, I've found it to be, I don't know about you, but I found the most success for bringing scapula back into a more adducted, more neutral location, reducing the winging, to actually drive the person when they're doing something like a pull down, to
Mhm,
actually encourage them to go into flexion so that the scap actually abduct further under load, therefore
mhm,
giving me that eccentric load of the tissue that it probably never really
mhm,
experiences. And then that snaps in the stretch shortening reflex and I get a healthier concentric contraction rather than just going from neutral and trying to have them drive back. Do you go that full end of the spectrum? Do you experience that flexion and that anterior tilt of the rib cage in order for them to drive back home?
With some of our exercises, we start in a protraction position and then go to the retraction. So we are getting the full range with
Yeah.
some of the things that we do. You know, the more the forward, the cable row as opposed to the pull down, we'll do, you know, I want to see that protracted, rounded, bring them back, pinch, and all the way back. So we're getting the full range of the muscle.
One of my go-tos for most people, because they fall into the categories you've just described, is a unilateral lat pull where I have
Mm-hmm.
the opposite leg forward and I really encourage all of that nice rotation and
Yep.
lengthening through the lat tissue down into that thoracolumbar fascia and get that glute on the opposite side start to fire, that whole sling effect. I imagine
Yes.
you're probably doing the same thing with a lot of your throwers and athletes.
Yep, we'll do it with 2 feet down, and then we'll add the glute into that by bringing that back leg up. And I want to see that nice long lengthening, and then the retract and pull on one leg through the core to the scap. You know, so it's exercise integration. You know, we're really big into to bringing in as many muscles as we can with the exercises that we pick, instead of like just a leg extension, hitting the quad has its place in the game, but when we got in regards to functionality and what these people do on the court or the field or the mat, I mean, we never function isolating just one muscle.
Never.
So yeah, we love those types of exercises.
All right. Now, strength training is not the one trick pony. It's not the overall solution. So when you see and you assess somebody's posture, which I'd love to dive deeper into in a moment, but when
Mhm.
you have already assessed somebody's posture, what does that tell you about their need for mobility, flexibility, and soft tissue work?
Usually that gives me an idea about their lack of mobility in some areas. Um, their flexibility, you know, I've trained all stars in baseball at the major league level that couldn't touch their toes, but they were all stars and they were Gold Glove Award winners. So, you know, we don't need to be Gumby, but we need to know how to play with the range we have, and we got to try to keep it from getting lesser. And if I can improve someone's pelvic alignment, okay, that may improve their their range of motion in their hip, whether it be touching their toes or internal rotation, just by realigning their pelvis, where I'm not stretching the muscle to get longer, but I'm going to allow the muscle to work at its full function when the joint's in a better place.
I'm really glad you bring that up because if we're just looking at the bony structure of the pelvis and we have some right rotation, You
Hmm.
already know most likely that that right hip's going to be in flexion, internal rotation, while the left hip, meanwhile, is going to be in extension, external rotation.
Hmm.
So as long as you can bring that bony unit of the pelvis back into more balanced state, all the tissue is going to have to respond, right? You're not going
Hmm.
to be hunting down one particular muscle to strengthen or stretch or manipulate with soft tissue or anything else. You just need some type of strategy to bring it back to center. And I'm also glad that you brought up the pelvis, because that's the origin of movement, right?
Right.
That's the center of our wheel. That's our hub.
It's our
And
engine block.
we can try and chase something up in the cervical spine or at the elbow, but we might want to go back to center, because it may be that just by centering that, everything else starts to change in its ability to move and the
Up and
patterns
down
or
the
the
chain.
kinematic sequence, right? Up and down the chain. So
Yep.
how do you do your posture assessment? What is it? Is any special recipe, or are we talking Colonel Sanders
Oh no. I
outperformance?
mean, I I think where my uniqueness comes in is like I said, we just work on opening up the anterior chain and strengthening the posterior chain. A lot of uniped work, rotational power if that's the sport we're working with, and keep people in their ranges. We don't do one rep maxes. We build from the inside out. Like you said, that pelvis, and it's not just the core; it's the obturators and the multifidi and the transverse abdominis and some of those muscles that people know nothing about, and we just got to know how to get them going. Diaphragmatic breathing and exercises like that will help us build the core within the core. But when I and another thing, you asked about, like, what are the things that stick out to you? Well, that winging scap and then going down the chain is everybody's wired to stretch their hamstrings. If I ask 100 people to stretch, Rock, 95 of them are going to their hamstrings first. And people will say, well, my hamstrings are tight. They're tight. Oh, they're tight because you have an anterior tilted pelvis, and those hamstrings connect on the backside of your pelvis. And if your pelvis is tilted this way, your hip flexors are short. And guess what's long? We're stretching your hamstrings automatically, and you're stretching them. So you're just contributing to the problem. And that's why not just our athletes, but practitioners, I see tons of stretching hamstrings for low back pain because it makes them feel better. But then they go away and it comes back.
Yeah, it's like
So
cocaine. Yeah,
yeah, I
in
said
the
let's
short
let's
term, I think it sounds good, but long term problems, not
right.
that I'm
So let's
saying.
just refocus those efforts. Let's teach you how to stretch your quads and your hip flexors and your psoas, and let's do some strength work for that glute med and your hamstrings, which get very little work throughout the day as we grow older and we're not playing hoops anymore and doing lateral movement. We are very sagittal animals, you know. Um, and it fixes the problem. Like, oh my God, all my life, all my therapists and all my chiropractors and all of my doctors have told me to stretch my hamstrings, stretch my hamstrings. You're the first one ever that's told me not to and stretch my quads. Well, yeah, do a foam
Yeah.
roll. Does it hurt to foam roll your glutes and hamstrings? No, that's why people do it. Does it hurt to foam roll your hip flexor, quads, and IT bands?
Hmm.
Yeah, because that's where stress is. That's where the
I,
stress is in the muscle.
I'm so glad you bring that up. And just the word tight. That's one word that, if we could remove that from a movement specialist vocabulary, take that out, because tight tells me nothing. When somebody tells me
Wow.
this is tight, well, is it tight because it's in a lengthened position like a rubber band being pulled
Right,
apart, or is it tight because it's shortened and doesn't know how to lengthen? Either way,
right,
you're going to feel this is tight. But
right.
without knowing where their structure is,
You
where
don't know
is
how to
that
fix it.
pelvis related? Yeah, you have no idea if you need to lengthen it or shorten it. You got to
Yeah.
know what the posture is. So I'm so glad that you bring that up.
And I love our doctors, and they're very good at what they do in the eval rooms and in the OR. But I think a lot of them they're just trained to lengthen muscles that are already lengthened or on that stretch tension rubber band, and we're just contributing to the issue. So getting back to your posture assessment, I have the kids take their sweatshirts off or your hoodies, and they stand, and I look for shoulder depression and elevation first. That's the first thing I do. So they're looking at me, arms are down, and generally with our overhead athletes, you see a depressed shoulder because those muscles are longer from throwing. So I'll note that, and then I get them in a profile position, and I look at the position of their head. Okay, and more times than not, it's a forward head posture. So I write that down. We need to correct that. And then the shoulders, are they rounded shoulders, or are they sitting back? Most people are, the tight pec miners, and again, very front-sided animals. So that's where I start the posture. And then I do, the forward flexion, we do side flexion, I do rotation for the lumbar spine, I do rotation for the thoracic spine, and then we get into the hips, and I do internal rotation of the hips, prone and supine. Okay, prone tells me muscle tightness, supine 90-90 tells me structural blocking. Okay.
Explain that. Explain
when you're prone on the table, the slack is off the muscle. Okay, so that if it's tight, that tells me it's muscular tightness. Now, if I'm prone or supine and I have the knee up at 90, and they're tight, that tells me structural tightness, not muscular.
Mm-hmm.
So one tells me bony, one tells me soft tissue. So we check internal, external rotation in both. And I will do a standing anterior tilt pelvis test. So I look at them in the profile. When I'm checking their forward head and their rounded shoulders, I have them lift up their shirt so I can see their belt line. And more times than not, it's like this to some level. Most of my athletes are stronger on the front side, and they have that gymnast butt, and it looks like the sway back. But if it's excessive, we really work to correct it. Get them on an aggressive stretching program, a really aggressive posterior chain strength program. Some correctives, things they can do at home with ankle bands and just their own body weight and a foam roll.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, I'm imagining Tom Myers anatomy trains overlaid into your movements, right? You've got forward and backward for the front and back lines, superficial and deep. You've got your lateral line, and then you worked on the functional line or the spiral line, right, with your rotation. So you're basically getting an understanding of the relationships of all these pathways and soft tissue. So are you also, just curious from my own perspective, are you also looking at like the joint speed, how when they rotate, there's more rotation at the pelvis in one direction compared to the rib cage in the opposite? Are you looking at that? You're generally getting kind of like a somewhat of an overview, a blurred vision going, okay, that's just something to keep in the back of my head for later.
That's something we'll look at later. Like in the first few weeks of training with some of the drills that we pick for some of our younger athletes or wherever they are on the spectrum, we'll look at how they move dynamically and loaded. But as far as for the evaluation day, I mean, we try to keep it to about an hour just for business sakes and, efficiency, but we'll look at some of those things and rehuddle on the fly when we need to make adjustments when we see these kids going through their programs and some of their movement routines that we do, Spider-Man walks and Turkish get-ups and things like that really, I mean, they expose limitations and weaknesses more than what I can do in that evaluation. That gives me an idea of what to program. And then as we start to program, those exercises will either be done correctly or really, okay, now we know we really need to focus on this because this cat can't get up from the Turkish get up. I just go to that all the time because that works just about the entire kinetic chain. That'll expose more to me. Tell me more.
That's great. So every movement is what you're saying is an assessment, and every assessment's a movement, and they just feed back and forth. It's a great way to just kind of follow the rabbit down the hole in a way.
Yep, there's a ton of corrections going on, and we will do a one-legged squat to really show us where the glute strength is, dominant to non-dominant. This is part of the evaluation. We will do a two-legged squat here, also with arms up, to see if they can get into a deep squat position, body weight. If they're shifting, if they can't get down into that position, if they break at the core, and we write all those down, and that tells us more weaknesses and limitations with the athlete.
Now, as your role with Allegheny Health Network, I've pronounced that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you cover that full umbrella of the spectrum? Do you focus on the athletes coming back and return to play? Are you dealing with the athletes that are past that and are trying to achieve optimal performance? Where's your role in all that?
Me personally or my team?
You personally.
Me personally, I'm the ace in the hole. Like, I put together performance teams that are made up of very good physical therapists, strength coaches, athletic trainers, recovery specialists, and I've written the foundation programs and the methodology, and we train under that. Now, all my coaches have strengths, and I want you to bring your strengths to the table. I'm not the smartest one in the room. These kids nowadays are very well versed in VBT and BFR, and we know all that. We don't get too far from our basics, push, pull, lift, carry, be able to get up from the ground, simple things. But we need to know how to do those things for our higher level clients because they want to do them, and they've gone through the rigors and the steps, and they're at that level where we need to train speed to the bar. So my role, sometimes I'll get a call from our chair of orthopedics, says, Frank, this kid's coming down from the University of Buffalo. I looked at him today. Where are you? What facility are you at today? I'll tell him where I'm at. Okay, this kid's going to go see you before he goes back out of town. I want you to assess his throwing arm, and we're going to get him on a program. You're going to write his program. We'll send him back. He'll come back in either 2 to 4 weeks, and I'll communicate with the kid by a call, text, email, and make sure he's doing all the right things. I have 5 of those that I see right now that come from out of town. Smaller colleges are not getting better. So I check in on everybody, Rock, but I let my team do the work, and I do program evaluations from time to time where I'm looking at programming for people that I've done the evaluations on, and maybe they're 8 weeks in, and I'll talk to the coach. Every coach that writes it has their name on the program, so I know who wrote it. And so that's kind of my job, is to oversee the program and also to generate more business. I'm doing a lot of speaking. My face is out in the communities, talking to high schools, covering events, doctors, and I don't know, that's kind of, I guess, what I do. We're getting into some industry now. We go to factories and corporations where we're talking to the office people and the people on the floor, construction workers. That's a whole nother area. I mean, that they need our help, and we're not asking them to stop smoking or eating what they like, or even go to the weight room and start, jogging or lifting. These are things they can do at home with a little rubber band, and some tubing and their own body weight and a foam roll. And if it allows these guys to work longer and make more money with less pain, then they're all ears, man. You got them in the palm of your hand.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question. I was wondering about tools. Now, of course, we've got our hands, we've got our ears, and we've got our mouth. So as coaches and guides, whatever you want to call ourselves, aside from those tools, the actual physical things in your facility, are there some, like, I really want to have these in my toolbox more than anything else? Are there some, whether it's machinery or anything else, what are your go-to things that you keep going, okay, it's the most common things I tell people to go to?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, our facilities, we're seeing the professionals, elites, down to the kids just getting started, that middle school age kid, bless you, to the, the geriatric that is still running, golfing, and maybe a master level swimmer, or the geriatric that just wants to carry their grandbaby without back pain. For all those people, foam roll, ankle bands, okay, the bands that perform better cells.
Yep.
Posture tubing, just tube. I cut up, I get it 100 rolls at a time, and I cut up 3-foot slices. So we're doing some of our posture work with that. Then the racks, the dumbbells, the kettlebells. I mean, people ask me if I could have one tool and that's it, what am I going to have? I'm picking the kettlebell. I can do conditioning with a kettlebell. I can do intense work with a kettlebell. I can do unilateral work with a kettlebell. I can do movement and improve my movement with a kettlebell. So we're big on kettlebells, TRXs, the racks, again, bumpers, iron. We have sleds. We have some. We're very lucky. When I left baseball, I opened up my own shop, and I think I spent $26,000 to get open on equipment. Had a couple racks and the basics, and now that I'm with a hospital network, I have an anti-gravity treadmill. We have a Dynavision hand-eye coordination reaction machine. We have power plates and cryotherapy machine chambers and leg pumps and a lot of luxury items that people will come to us, and we'll get referred from doctors because we have these items. That's how we get some of our business, but those are luxuries. The necessities are kind of what I rattled off.
That's nice. It's nice to have a very broad toolbox.
Yeah.
We're talking earlier about issues in the tissue, so to speak, and symptoms that will appear, whether it's in the elbow or the shoulder. And a while back, I had a teacher, and they said somebody came in with a shoulder problem. He's like, "Well, wait a minute. From what I understand, the Japanese word for problem is the same word they use for opportunity. So rather than think of it that way, how about instead of looking at that shoulder problem as a shoulder solution? Like the brain is trying to figure out the best way to achieve whatever desired motion it's trying to do. And if it can't get around this issue, then it's going to try and do it a different way. And so that thing that you're feeling right now in that shoulder is actually the brain's ability to try and solve this problem. So it just kind of resonates with me with what you were saying about the elbow, and you had to look somewhere else. You're always hunting down the problem, the
Right.
root source, right? That's essentially what you're doing with your clients, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put a Band-Aid on it. I want to fix it. I want to rebuild that part of the engine. We build high performance engines. I say it all the time, and I can't do that if the engine block's cracked. So we need to strip you down and see. I got to look under the hood. What are we dealing with? But I'm not big on, there's a place for modalities and ice and stim and ultrasounds and making you feel good, but it's going to come back if I don't fix the root of the problem. And that's, I think, being a movement specialist, a specialist with the body. And there's no really certification for that. That comes with an education, a couple of certifications, and about 30 years of experience. Um, that's and I guess, I don't know. Yeah, that's what we
I
do.
would say that's it. Now, curious, do you like crossword puzzles or solving kind of riddles and things like that?
Oh, all the time.
I
Sudokus,
bet.
crosswords. Yeah. Yeah, that works
There's a
this.
yes, but we're doing the same thing in the body. That's the most remarkable thing. No wonder,
Yeah.
yeah, that we like puzzles. We like clues. And when you see somebody move a certain way when they're doing the Turkish get up, you're like, well, there's a clue right there. And your attention is drawn to this one area that just there's something about it that isn't moving the way it should. Let's hunt that down. The next thing you know, oh well, they twisted their knee skiing 5 years ago. And that's created this pattern so
Right.
that it emerges when you're doing the Turkish get up, and it had nothing to really do with the pain in the shoulder or the destabilization in this area, but it reverts
Right.
back to that. It's
You're just
kind of cool
peeling
stuff.
peeling back the layers of the onion, and it tells its own story.
Well, do you have any stories like that with clients where you're going, okay, we kind of followed it back and it led to this? Like, do you have any that stick out of your head right now that you're working with an athlete and it was something that was perplexing doctors and PTs or whatever, and then you found out about this that had occurred in the past? Anything like that?
Man, I could tell you 3 of them that I did today if you wanted. I was watching this girl run. She had an ACL repair, and there was a little bit of a scar tissue lesion that ended up forming because we didn't get extension fast enough. So they had to go in again and clear out the scar tissue. So now she's finally to running, and I was watching her run on the treadmill, and one of our young PTs, he's a West Virginia student, and he was having her on the treadmill. I said, hey, once you get her up to the speed you want, she's doing 60 on, 60 off. I said, come back here with me and let's look at how she looks from the backside, running, because he's right next to her on the treadmill. I said, come back here. So, from the waist down, we're looking, okay, let's look at her heels. Are her heels coming up evenly? Yeah, okay. She's a little bit limited on this side because that's her surgical side, but it's not far. It looks pretty good. Let's look at her feet. How are her feet? And boom, pronate, pronate, pronate. I said, okay, how are we going to fix that? We got to ask her, does she have inserts? Are they old? How old are her shoes? Let's look at her arch, her foot arches. Let's start looking at her feet and ankles. Why is she collapsing there? And then we go up, we look at the knee height, and we looked at, is each leg in its lane? Does she have crossover? She had a little bit of a crossover. I said, we got to look at her glutes. We got to make sure her glutes are nice and strong to help keep that leg in its own lane, so we're not having crossover steps. And then also look at her arms. Her legs are going north and south. Her arms are kind of side to side. It's creating unneeded tension or torsion on her knee. So let's get her upper body cleaned up. He goes, my God. I was like, yeah, dude, this is what we got to look at. When we have a 15-year-old kid, big body, female volleyball player that is coming off her second, an ACL and then a cleanup, we have to clean this stuff up. Now it's not a structural problem. The leg's solid, the knee's solid, she has full range. Now it's a muscular problem. We need to get her stronger in these areas to correct the alignment. So that's one that happened today. There was a kid I worked with years ago. He's a college baseball player, and he was a speed guy, center fielder. And I knew the dad. The dad was a high school coach. He kept pulling his hamstrings, and so I talked about what they did, and he was doing the right things. I said, "Let me watch you run." And he just looked like a gazelle running. He had long strides, almost like he was overstriding. I said, John, let's do this again. This time, shorten your strides a little bit. And he was heel striking. And I'm just like, no one's ever corrected him on that. I said, let's shorten your stride a little bit. Let's focus on landing on the forefoot of your foot and less on the backside of your foot. So he did it. He goes, man, that feels really weird. It looks like I'm like tiptoeing, but it looks better. It looks better. Let's do your running like this. And within a week, he was pain-free. He went on and he played a couple extra years at Kent State, big program. Hamstring was behind, just stuff like that. Movement, you look at the movement. If it doesn't look right, doesn't add up to you, then you make the corrections. And you try to, you got to get the kid to be all in, to trust you and give it a chance. Make a plan, execute the plan, trust the process.
I think stories like that are so powerful for people to listen and just go, okay, yeah, it's not just that the hamstring woke up one day and said, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's just turn this kid's life into a living hell. It wasn't like that. There was something that made that happen. Or your volleyball athlete, there was a reason why that the ACL just started to misbehave, or trying to do more work, shall we say, trying to solve the issue of something else not going on, like the ability of the pelvis to properly move in three-dimensional space, or the opposition of the rib cage on top of the pelvis. There's always reasons behind the cause and effect that's occurring. So yeah, I think stories like that are really important to share with people as we're doing it.
We see a ton, and we talked about the anterior tilted pelvis. So it goes, down, and then you have those ribs that are tight that flare up. We call it the Pac-Man. So the ribs go this way, the pelvis goes that way, and our goal is to get them here. Let's loosen up the ribs. Let's drop the ribs, teach them how to belly breathe, get that core stronger, and just stretch their fascia, and on the front side, loosen up those hip flexors and psoas and let everything fall back into the place where it's supposed to be. And then we can move forward. It's not sexy and it doesn't have a lot of oomph to it, but the stuff works, man.
Well, that's just it. You get the buy-in by the way they feel. It's
right.
It's not sexy. It's not going to be throwing a whole bunch of weights around either. It's more subtle, but it's so much more powerful. You get them in a more centrated, more balanced place, and performance just goes through the roof.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yep.
So Frank,
and
go ahead.
Then you teach them, and we talked about this before. We created video libraries, and now they can really take their home program to the next level. Because again, these kids all communicate. If I can get it on this, they're going to follow it instead of giving them papers and killing trees. So we'll email them the program in the videos of, sideline quad stretches and kneeling hip flexors and getting their glutes going, and the big exercise hamstring curls and bridges and stuff they can do at home to bridge the gap in between visits with us. We'll do the higher intensity stuff, but we want to do some of that cooler stuff sooner. You got to do this home stuff, this home program, and get everything, make the changes faster.
Yeah. And for once, we use the cell phone in a beneficial way to improve their posture rather than degrade it.
Right.
So Frank, you're going to be at the Perform Better Training Summit, 3 days in Chicago. That is, do you have the dates? I know it's in July.
Yeah, we were just looking at it. I want to say it's, I think 15, 16, 17. I'm on Sunday. I think Sunday. It's 17th.
And the title of your presentation?
Shoot, I don't even remember. I
It has
think
to do
it's
with posture and strength training. I know that.
yeah, it's yes, strength training for skeletal alignment or something
All
like that.
right. I'll put it in the description below the podcast so that we don't both look like can't remember a
That's
damn
way
thing.
too far ahead,
I
Rock.
know, man. I know. But that's going to be great. It'll be here before we know it. And you got a lot of other really great speakers at that event. And
You'll be
yeah,
there.
no, oh, I'd love to. I'm going to be in Orlando. I'll be
Oh,
down in
okay.
June, kicking it off in Orlando. But I'll stand on the pulpit with you when it comes to posture and alignment. So
What's your talk on?
I'm working on. I'm explaining the usage of small foam wedges under the surface of the foot to
Yeah.
create better timing sequences, better better ground contact when doing loaded movements, when for rehab as well as strength conditioning. So by changing the position of the foot, how can we create a better kinematic sequence up the chain? And so that should be fun. So we're going to just explore different contact points and how we can affect the glutes just by putting something under the big toe or the heel. So that
Yeah,
should be fun.
good
But
stuff.
if people want to know more about the Allegheny Health Network, obviously you guys have a website. If people are in the Pennsylvania area
Yeah.
or anywhere around, what's the best way to contact you?
AHN/sportsperformance.org. That's our website. It's a very big company. The website isn't the best. They're always trying to create more efficiency because sometimes it's hard to find us via the website. But that AHN, Allegheny Health Network, AHN/sportsperformance.org. Or you can just email me at frank.velasquez@ahn.org. Or you can just Google Frank Velasquez when you're in Pittsburgh and you'll find out where I'm at.
There you go.
I'm
And do
usually
you
on the
post
internet.
on Instagram? Are you an Instagram follower or a poster?
You know, that's a good question. I was just talking about this today. I've always been a Facebook guy because I think it shows my age, but I've been gravitating more towards Twitter because there's a lot of good guys that I respect in the industry that are on Twitter, and it's a little more talking shop like what we're doing. Somebody will post something and I'll read and sometimes I'll comment stuff that I dig and stuff that I may have a different opinion on. And I dig it because it's all professional. It's not, no one's slamming each other. So it's sometimes we agree to disagree, which is cool. Yeah. So I'm on those two more. I do have an Instagram account, but that's how I communicate with our young clients, through Instagram and they, that's kind of their thing. And I don't do Twitter or Snapchat or anything like that.
I gotcha. Well, man, this has been fun. We're going to have to do this again. There's no doubt about it. We got so much more to talk about. But
I'm game, man. I love talking shop.
Right on.
Learn more about what you can teach me.
I think it's the other way around. And that's another wrap for the Zealous Podcast. Frank, I just want to say thank you, my friend, for coming on. I really enjoyed the conversation we had. And for the listening audience, be sure to check him out with the Allegheny Health Network, as well as Perform Better's Summit that's coming in July in Chicago. And you can't miss that. 3 days of amazing information with some of the top presenters in the field. In the meantime, remember, subscribe and follow us along on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're all there. Have a great week.